Hello everyone, this is part 4 of my series of Excel videos. So in the first part I introduced you to the program, the second part we learned how to enter data, and in the third part we learned how to write formulas. So now I have a table of numbers and I want to construct a graph. And I want to show the absorbance, which is right here in this column, as the dependent variable as a function of protein concentration, which is over here, and protein concentration will be the independent variable. So the language we usually use is y versus x. So that means that absorbance is going to be the dependent variable, and that will be on the y-axis, and protein concentration is the independent variable, and that's going to be on the horizontal or the x-axis. So when I want to plot my graph, I want to select my data, and you can select a whole block if your data, if your x and y data are right next to each other, if they're adjacent to each other, but here they're not. So I'm going to highlight my protein concentration first, and then I have to press and hold down the control key, and then select my absorbance data. So again, when you press and when you first, I'll do this again. So if I did this and I didn't press down the control key, I would select all of that. So you have to highlight the protein concentration, press and hold down the control key, and then highlight the absorbance. So now Excel is going to know that this is the X data and that's the Y data. So the next thing I want to do is I want to plot a graph. So I'm going to do insert, and Excel calls graphs charts. So it has a whole bunch of charts right here, and the chart that we want is going to be a scatter or an XY chart or graph. So if I click on this, it will give me a number of different possibilities. So this is the one I want. I want a scatter plot with just the points. I don't want to connect them. I'm going to do that later, but I'm going to do that in a way that's intentional. And here's my graph. So I'm going to just click and move this right here so it doesn't cover up my data. So that looks pretty good, but there's a lot of formatting that I'm going to need to do. So one of the things we should notice is that if I click away from the graph, then I get my regular tabs up here. So if you want the functions associated with the graph, you'll have to actually click on the graph itself. So I'm going to do a number of things. So I need to label my axes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Add Chart Element and go to Axes Titles, and then Primary Horizontal, and it'll just come up with the axis title. So if I just click on this and kind of highlight over axis title, remember that's my protein concentration. So this is protein concentration. And remember the units were micrograms per milliliter of water. So again, I'm going to have to fix that later because I typed milligrams. And then for my next chart element, let's click back here, Add Chart Element, Axis Title, Primary Vertical. So I'm just going to, again, highlight over Axis Title and type, this is absorbance at 280 nanometers. I think I will go ahead and fix this now. So if I click here, what I can do is I can just highlight the M. Remember, I wanted this to be symbol, and this menu comes up, so I can scroll down and I can get to my symbol menu right here, and that gives me a microgram. And then for the 2, I can just highlight just the 2. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to the Home tab because I remember that that's where my font group is, and click on that arrow, and then click on the box that says subscript, and now I have my subscript. So now I have my my axes titles written properly. The graph comes with grid lines. You can leave them there if you want, or you can take them out if you want to. So if you just select the grid lines, you can see that the horizontal grid lines are selected, I'm going to hit delete. I don't actually like the grid lines. You can leave them there if you want, but you don't have to. You notice when you click around on the graph that different things are selected. So here's the graph itself. If I wanted the grid lines, I would have to actually click on the grid lines, and I can get rid of that. This graph doesn't need a legend. You would only need a legend if you were plotting two different things, but if you wanted a legend, again, if I just make sure I'm clicking on the graph itself so that I get my menus here for chart design, I could go ahead and add a legend. But again, this graph wouldn't have a legend because we're only plotting one variable. So the other thing that I like to do is I want to format the numbers here. So you might notice for my protein concentration never gets higher than 0.8, but Excel has it up here at 0.9. So if I just click on the numbers, then what I can do here is I'm actually going to right click and a format axis comes up. So I hit format axis, and then I should get another menu over here. And I want my minimum to be 0, but I want my maximum to be 0.8. I don't want it to be 0.9 because 0.8 is as high as I go. I can have tick marks. Right now I don't have any tick marks. I'd like to have some tick marks. So I think my major tick marks, I want to take 0.8 and divide it into 0.1. And my minor, I'm going to make that 0.5. 0.2 is a little bit too small. And to display that, I'm going to have to click here where it says tick marks, and I'm going to want to tell Excel that I both want both major and minor. And I like my tick marks to be on the inside. The next thing I'm going to do is, I know there are 3 significant figures here, but where it says number, my axis is a little bit too crowded. So I don't really actually want Excel to express this in 3 decimal places. Maybe 1 or maybe 2 would be okay. So if I click on 2 and say, I'm just going to say I'm going to add that as a possibility, then I only have 2 significant figures. So that looks a lot better. I'm going to do the same thing over here for absorbance. So again, if I click on this and I get my format axis window, but it already happens to be open, again, my absorbance, it goes up to 0.79. So again, I don't have to go up to 0.9, sorry, I can just do 0.8. I'm going to do the tick marks the same way. And I'm going to put my tick marks, both the major and the minor, on the inside. And again, I think that the decimal places having 3 is a little bit too busy. I'd like it to have 2, so I'm going to hit add. And I think that that looks a lot better. So I'm going to head and X out of that. Finally, what I'm going to do is, I can see that there's a linear relationship between absorbance and protein concentration. So if I right click just anywhere on the points, I can add what's called a trend line. And again, a box is going to come up, and I want it to be linear. That's already selected. And the other thing I want to do is I want to display the equation and the R-squared value on the chart. I don't want to set the intercept because I want the intercept to be what it is. So I'm not going to do that, but I'm just going to display the equation on the chart. So now I have to do a couple of things. One is that I'm going to move this so it's not blocking the line. So I have my y equals mx plus b equation right here, and my R-squared value is 0.9995. So remember that when the R-squared value is close to 1, that means the data are correlated. So there's a good correlation between absorbance and protein concentration. The other thing that sometimes Excel will do is, when you put a trend line, is that it will alter your axis for you. And I don't really like what Excel does. I don't like it to be in negative. So I'm going to go back and format axis, and I'm going to change the minimum back to 0 because I don't like that Excel has put this back to 0. It's because my y-intercept is very slightly below 0, but I don't like how that looks, so I went back and I changed it. So the other thing you can do with your chart title, the significant figures here are actually pretty good, but sometimes you'll get a situation where you only have one significant figure, and that's not really enough. So if you click on this, you can change the number, and here you'd have to change it from general to number, and then you can decide how many decimal places. For example, this is just 2. That's not enough. I actually want it to be 4 because I want the greater precision that I get there. So you're able to change how that is displayed. And the last thing, that just says chart title. I want my own chart title, so I'm going to call this determination of protein concentration, because that's what we're doing. The type of title that you don't want is you don't want what I call a Y versus X title. You don't want to say absorbance versus protein concentration, because that is something that's visible just from looking at the graph. So you want to give your graph an informative title. So that is how you construct a graph. Let's go back to, for example, maybe if you want to print this at this point, that you'll want to look and make sure that this looks nice for your printing. For again, you might want to adjust the margins, the scaling, or portrait versus landscape to make sure that it looks nice on the page. And I might want to center that a little better. Yeah, that looks good right there. So that is how to plot a graph. In the last video, I will show you how to do a linear regression. So see you in part 5.